Our presentation was on the contributions of the Venetian Republic to Western economic development. The Venetian Republic was an Italian state that originated from the city of Venice. It existed for over a millennium, and its jurisdiction extended into Dalmatia, further into Italy, and across many islands. It had a far-flung trading outpost and fought many battles against the Ottoman Empire. The Venetian Republic thrived on trade and only became involved in war to protect its commercial routes and interests. Since they were so independent, Venice was an important culture and intellectual center during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Below is a picture of the Venetian Republic, and it's near Venice, Italy, and that's the body of water that is kind of in the middle of that. So the city arises from the waters of the lagoon and is symbolized above all by a form of water transport in the gondola. From the Middle Ages onward, the access to the erratic sea and the extensive networks of the canals that branched off either side of Venice's main thoroughfare, the Grand Canal, and underpinned its wealth, and these waterways permitted to access all parts of the city. Most of their economy and culture was land-based, and it had streets and spaces that enabled people and goods to move from place to place on foot. They ranged from small yards and paved areas alongside canals to narrow streets that linked different quarters of the city and crossing the canals by bridges. So they had a great deal of transportation and access to different items. The culture of the Venetian Republic was very broad. They had a lot of artists, and they had some theatrical performances as well. So Venice began to lose its position as an international center of trade because of the discovery of a sea route to India and the Ottomans' rise to empire in the Mediterranean Sea. It was still an important economic and cultural center in Europe, however, where people from different countries met and exchanged ideas and opinions. At the beginning of the 16th century, the Venetian government removed a ban on theatrical performances. The groups of street players began to perform in the houses of the nobles, who were their patrons, and later began to charge admission. The theater became a profitable concern, and investors built halls for different groups. This encouraged not only the development of drama in Venice, but also the development of the architecture of public buildings there and elsewhere, such as the Barbarian Theater, a private theater in Rome, and the Pergola Theater, which is a commercial theater in Florence. And these pictures are some samples of different theatrical performances that they did. So the Venetian Renaissance runs into a period that is considered to be high Renaissance or Mannerism to art critics. Many Venetian artists took inspiration from Raffaello and Michelangelo, who were considered to be high Renaissance artists. In addition to common religious images, Venetian paintings gave life to important artistic themes, such as the landscape. It is necessary to mention the great importance of the school's mutual benefit organizations or charitable institutes that support artists to create their masterpieces. The Venetian architecture of this period is characterized by many people that made architectural history. And Alessandro was the great Venetian sculptor. He worked with Veronese, Salvino, and Palladio, and he was strongly influenced by Michelangelo. Vittorio liked to give his sculptures a sense of movement, which expressed rhythm and elegance at the same time. And the pictures on the side are some buildings of architecture. The picture on the left is a sample of some artwork done by famous Venetian artists. And this one is called the Vedetta Fantastica, and it is by Michele Marescacci. And Michele worked at the court of Saxony for a time and returned to Venice by 1735. In his view, paintings were influenced by Cantaletto, which painted a lot of landscape portraits, and he would view like the area of Venice that he wanted to paint, and then he would paint that later in a studio after he wrote down the ideas that or activities that people were doing, and sometimes he would change it to make the activity more appealing, or the town or the activities of people, and switch it up a little bit from what it was really like. And in his turn, he perhaps influenced the work of Ghiardi. Michele did. So he was a big influence to the Venetian Republic. So the second picture, which is on the right, was called Vincenzio Scamozzi, and it was by Paolo Veronese, and he worked for patrons, religious and secular, in Venice, and his important works are the full-scale decoration of the Venetian Church of Sebastiano and the ceiling and wall paintings for the Library of Marco and the Ducal Palace. So one of his specialties were large-scale scenes of feast, and one of them was the Last Supper that was painted for a Dominican friar in 1573, and he ran numerous workshops and was assisted by his brother and sons. So he did a lot more of serious artwork that was in big palaces and stuff. So he replicated different things. Culture did influence Western economic development because the enormous wealth that the maritime commerce generated also fostered the manufacture of luxury goods, and especially textiles and metalwork, glassware, leatherwork. And it also supported a thriving community of artists, sculptors, and architects. So by the end of the 15th century, Venice had become one of the leading community of artists, European centers of printing, bookmaking, and publishing, and they did about 150 new titles a year. So the Venetian artists were very successful because of the resources that they had, and they manufactured the luxury goods helped the artists extremely. So the cultural traditions helped in making Venice one of the leading European centers of printing, bookmaking, and publishing because of some of these books were about their culture and traditions. The manufacturing of luxury goods, along with the printing and bookmaking, helped contribute to Western economic development because of the technology that has developed through manufacturing and printing. Some famous navigators from the Venetian Republic were John Cabot and Marco Polo. And John Cabot was famous for the voyage of Matthew, and he sailed using a northern route so he could take advantage of shorter sea crossing. But some people said that he found Newfoundland, but others say it was Maine or Nova Scotia, and the crew disappeared, so that's why we don't have much information about what he discovered. But evidence did come about that he did reach Canada, but the route cannot be determined. So his voyage is kind of a mystery to a lot of people. And with Marco Polo, he traveled from Europe to Asia in about 24 years, and this was with his family, and their journeys brought them to China, and he was one of the first to leave a detailed chronicle about his experience doing that and finding China. So these famous navigators contributed to Western economic development because of the discoveries that they made. When they found these new areas, people started living there, which meant that the economy and the populations in the certain areas increased. Cultures also developed in these areas because the individuals were coming together from different areas and sharing their beliefs and their traditions. Trade did increase because of these new areas, and new items could be made and grown because of the different resources that were available. So individuals gathered together and helped found the regions that were discovered. They each put in their own opinions and traditions to start and develop a foundation. The Dutch discovered Tasmania, New Zealand, Tonga, and the Fiji Islands. The first voyage consisted of exploring the Indian Ocean, Australia, and the Southern Pacific. The second voyage was traveling near the Australian South Pacific waters, and the Great Britain made numerous discoveries, not only with land, but also with astronomy. Many expeditions were made on the Pacific Ocean, Antarctic, Arctic, and around the world. One of the first voyages was sailing to Tahiti to observe Venus passing between the Earth and the Sun. During the middle of this expedition, a route was mapped to New Zealand and eastern Australia, and one of the first discoveries made by Vasco Núñez de Balboa was a European explorer, was to see the Pacific Ocean. Many navigators from other countries found what is now the United States, and some of them did it on accident in hopes it was another country.
About the economical development of the Venetian Republic. The Venetian Republic had a fascinating economical development. The Venetian Republic opened Western Europe to trade from the 7th century until the Renaissance, creating commercial links with Northern Europe, countries such as Germany, Ireland, Belgium, with the Mediterranean area, cities such as Constantinople or Beirut, Northern Africa, countries such as Egypt, and even went further and created contacts with some parts of Asia. The Venetian Republic created a strong capitalist environment as the society was dominated by merchants. The Venetians were producing and exporting all kinds of products thanks to the major technological progress they made in terms of shipping technology. The Venetian Republic geographical location permitted this great expansion as it was located in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea and open to the world. Venetian Republic political system. The Venetian Republic political system was modern and efficient. The Venetians created different institutions which aims were to protect the rights of the citizens and the merchants. They also created a strong fiscal system that was known to be fair and favored the economic development with low taxes and capital accumulation. The Venetian Republic had good contacts with most countries and developed strong trade relationships with several of them. The Venetian Republic was under the Catholic Church regime but enjoyed great freedom and independence from the Pope. The Venetian Republic favored merchants from its own empire with laws that prohibited immigrant merchants from the Venetian trade. The political system of the Venetian Republic backed up the trade development and encouraged contacts with the world. It was not a closed economy. The economic structure of the Venetian Republic. The Venetian Republic created a modern economic structure in Western Europe by developing a capitalist model and developing foreign trade. The Venetian Republic created an advanced banking system in which they were issuing bonds for the people to buy. The Venetian Republic also used debt to finance its war expenses, then created new credits in their bank system records, which ultimately decreased their price of money transfer, about 20%. This creation of new credits was fictitious money, an illusion of wealth creation. The Venetian Republic economic structure was complex, advanced, and contributed to the Western economic development. It was one of the first signs of capitalism in Europe and in the world. Maritime trade and foreign development played a very important role in the Venetian Republic economy. Sea trade was the main economical activity of the Venetian Empire. The Venetian Empire had a monopoly on salt and was exporting it to Parma, Piacenza, and Milan through the Mediterranean Sea. They traveled to Spain, the south of France, and Constantinople to sell their merchandise. The Venetian merchants also used the sea and the impressive Venetian fleet to export timber and wheat. In 600, the Venetian Empire realized that it had an economical advantage over the rest of Europe, and the Venetians became seafaring and trading people. They filled up ships and were trading everywhere they could. Here's a representation of the Venetian fleet. As we can see, they had many boats and were able to fill them up and travel to sell their merchandises. Maritime trade was very important for the Venetian Republic. They were exporting everywhere they could. The maritime trade was huge for the Venetian Republic thanks to the geographical location and the relations they created with other countries or empires. Here's a representation of the trade routes of the Venetian Republic in the Renaissance. As we can see, Venice is in the middle of the Mediterranean and the middle of Europe. They were able to export to Constantinople, Beirut, Alexandria, Tripoli, Lisbon, Barcelona. They are all located in the Mediterranean area, and even went up to Belgium and the city of Bruges. Even though maritime trade was very important in the Venetian Republic, the land trade also played an important role. The Venetian merchants also utilized land trade. In 630, Venetian merchants were crossing the Alps in order to go trade in France. In 877, the Venetian Empire made a deal with Germany so that the Venetian merchants were able to travel and sell their merchandise in Germany. The Venetians wanted to export and develop their economy as much as possible in Europe, but also across the world. Land trade was a complement of the huge sea-oriented trade the Venetian Republic already had. The Venetian Republic heritage to the Western economy. The Venetian Republic massively developed trade in the western part of Europe, bringing new trading routes and allies in the Mediterranean Sea. The fall of Constantinople and the decreasing number of trade allies slowly pushed the Venetian Republic to collapse. Venice became an independent city-state until its invasion by the French and by Napoleon in the 19th century. Later, the city became part of Italy and is still part of Italy nowadays. Nevertheless, the Venetian Republic structured and shaped capitalism in Europe with a new political and economical model that brought wealth to the region. The Venetian Republic lasted almost 11 centuries, from the Middle Ages until the Renaissance, and tremendously contributed to the Western economical development. The Venetian Republic developed trade in the Mediterranean area, as well as Northern Europe, Middle East, and Asia. It created different economical and political institutions that favored trade and permitted economical development. Culture also played a major role in the economical development of the region. The artwork, combined with navigation discoveries, allowed the Venetian Republic to expand its knowledge and trade to new horizons. The culture of the city of Venice brought people from all around the world and gave exposure to Western Europe. Nowadays, Venice is a touristic city that is part of Italy, a city that has a strong historic background and still fascinates many people. Here is our works cited.